Chapter 13. The Quantum Theory. 1. Principles of physics are involved in a study of the quantum theory. It is the theory of distribution of energy throughout nature. It was developed in the Berlin University as an outcome of investigation into radiation from black objects. This research resulted in the conclusion that all forms radiate a different energy and that there is nothing in the world of form that is an inert mass. Every form has within itself some degree of energy, and this energy is a distinct emanation of the energy that fills infinite space. The amount of energy that each particular form radiates is in direct proportion to the relationship which it has with the universal energy. 2. Just as a pendulum swings in a long or short arc, according to the amount of force exerted to start it swinging, just so all forms retain the amount of active energy required in sending it forth. This energy is retained by the form just to the degree that it retains its relation to the energy which sent it forth. If the pendulum stops, it is because the impelling force has ceased to exert influence upon it. Matter becomes less and less active as it loses some of its contact with the original impelling force which started it into motion. When this energy ceases to act within the form disintegrates. 3. Metaphysically, this has much of vital importance to those of the Western world. The movement in the United States came under the Depression, and all that means is that there was no foundation in fact. That is, it was founded on only a half-truth. There is fact as a basis for our metaphysics, but that fact was overlooked and misunderstood by most of its exponents in the United States. This will all be discussed in our consideration of the quantum theory. 4. The Eastern world, those of higher thought, have known the facts propounded in the quantum theory. They deal in brief with but one fact, that of the universality of all things, and consequently in dealing with that one fact they have a definite basis for both science and metaphysics. The psychology of the Western world is mere child's play. It is based to a great extent upon theory. Whenever you deal with divisions of mental, material, and physical, you are bound to base at least 75% of your calculations on theory. Division is not unity, and unity is not division, and the basis of all creation is that it is a unit. I am that I am, and beside me there is no other, is the eternal declaration of fact, which is the unity of all things. The direct violation of this fundamental unity is in considering the mind as having phases or faculties, when, in reality, mind is a single unit, not only as within the individual, but as existing in and of the universe. Material form is not something isolated from and independent of the universe, but is one in and with the universal substance. The physical body is not an isolated phase of the creative scheme, but is in and one with the universal energy. To violate this fundamental unity is to isolate yourself in a hypnotic state where you seem to be a separate being, and therefore you cut yourself off, devitalize yourself, and ultimately destroy your ability to further manifest in this plane. To deny the relationship of the visible with the invisible is to push yourself right out of your body and into the invisible. 5. The Eastern philosophy is not based upon theory at all. It is based upon a definite scientific fact or principle. That is the same idea that Einstein is bringing out in the quantum theory. He has brought it out in greater evidence than has any other scientist in the Western world. Many are saying that it is the gap between science or physics and true religious thought. 6. The Easterner does not approach the matter of religious thought as theory at all. In fact, he proves that it is not theory. Thereby, he accomplishes the very fact and the possibilities involved in that fact. You do not see the Eastern philosophers pass out a theory of anything. Their basis is always in fact. It, of course, is not fact simply because they pronounce it so, but because it has a scientific basis in fact. That fact was clearly revealed by Christ when he said, "I and my Father are one." preserving the unity of himself with the whole. That is the basis from which all successful living must evolve, and it is always to the degree that this oneness is maintained by the individual that he begins to radiate the energy that sent him into being. This is the basis of the quantum theory as applied from the viewpoint of pure religion or pure metaphysics. And that is why the Eastern philosophers gave so much attention to the quantum theory. They see the scientists of the world returning to the basis of their own religious thought held for thousands of years. 7. Einstein did not come right out and say that it is all spirit. Consequently, it was urged that the physical or material was not a fact, but he showed that it is based upon one joint determination. He put it as one general principle, correlating all physics, as he said, under one head. That is exactly what those of higher Eastern thought had determined long ago, that there is but one principle, one scientific basis, and that basis one of being. 8. Now the Western world does not go back and reason from that principle. They work through to that principle from the external. Consequently, it is not necessarily a true form of reasoning. That is, their form of reason is not truly scientific reason. All true reason works out from principle to its manifestation, and not from the manifestation back to principle. Imagine trying to work a problem by reasoning back, or attempting to reason back to principle by studying the size, shape, form, and general construction of the accumulation of figures. The people of the Western world, in their attempt to solve the riddle of life, are doing that very thing. By this process, they become highly mental, or, as we put it, intellectual. And as we already know, their intellectual knowledge is always subject to revision, for it does not prove itself. That is why one of our modern scientists has said that all written works on science prior to the last 10 years should be burned. The Eastern world is carried beyond the intellectual or the ordinary intellectual. Of course, true principle and reason from the basis of the one fact is the highest form of intellect. But the hypothesis that the Eastern world takes puts it wholly on a true intellectual basis in carrying it to a clearer conception. 9. The intellect of the Western world covers a wide range but comes to no absolute conclusion in its hypotheses or theories. All of the science of the Western world has been based upon that hypothesis or theory. The people of the Western world have regressed to the point where they know the existence of certain determining factors, but they never go directly to the simple denominator of one principle when handling fact. The Eastern philosophers have always based their premises upon one natural fact, and there you have the basis of the quantum theory, one universal fact from which all form emanates and operates as the animating force of the created form. The universal distribution of energy. 10. The difference between the Hindu conception and the theory of monism is that the latter eliminated all but the blind force of nature or creation. The Hindu always considered it an active, intelligent force that knew what it was doing, an energetic force, and a force that did accomplish an intelligent creation that moved toward an intelligent purpose, and that anyone who would work with the intelligence of that force could accomplish all things through it. 11. The crux of the whole matter is therefore right knowledge. What we have called knowledge is past. The true knowledge is outside of the senses. The true basis of knowledge is to know the motivating force and the ends toward which it moves, as it is this motivating sense or the inward sense of the trend of the motivating force of the universe that brought all things into existence in the beginning and will bring all things into being through that individual who senses and works in harmony with its purpose. 12. The true knowledge comes through samadhi, or silence. It comes through an inner feeling, or an intuitive knowing. This is rightly what we call understanding. With all your getting, get understanding. When we obey what we inwardly feel, the accomplishment is achieved, and then we have correct knowledge, for it is based on the outworking of principle. This is the manner in which all true knowledge comes, not only in things spiritual, but in relation to the principles which we use every day. We discover certain principles, apply these principles, results are forthcoming, and from these results we formulate our knowledge. 13. When you take that knowledge completely out of the realm of hypnosis, you get down to the fundamental fact or truth. Knowledge does not necessarily exist in the fundamental fact. That fact exists prior to and is greater than knowledge. Knowledge, as the Hindu puts it, comes directly from the expression of the fundamental fact. 14. When the Bible says that the flesh profiteth nothing, it does not say that the flesh is nothing. It has no reality except that which is of spirit, which produced it. The flesh is not a producer. It does not produce anything, for it is the thing produced. It is the spirit which produces. Flesh is spirit in form, as they put it. They do not make any distinction between flesh and spirit or material and spiritual. Consequently, it is all one and the same to them. And that is where they accomplish. The Word made flesh is the true spiritual form. 15. When the Spirit works its manifest form, it obeys a manifestation of law. If you can know that law, you can know Spirit definitely. As Paul says, faith is Spirit substance. It means that faith made knowing is all substance. You know instead of having faith. There is where the Sanskrit never deviates. That evidence of spirit, which is first faith and then knowing, creates. Through that evidence, men create always, not through the senses or the sense of a material or physical, but through all substance as spirit. 16. Faith is the active principle of the mind. The mind acting upon inner knowing or understanding ripens into knowledge or becomes absolute knowledge. Spiritual intuition is direct knowing. It is tapping the infinite consciousness directly at its source. This power of direct knowing is born in every individual. Some manifest it earlier in life, chiefly because they are less hypnotized. That is, the less one is subjected to the supposed knowledge of the race, which is really ignorance, the more readily does that one follow what he instinctively knows and feels to be true. It is within the individual always and must be brought out. 17. Jesus said, I have nothing save that which comes in the name and through the power of Christ, putting himself in direct receptivity to spiritual intuition at all times. What Jesus did was really a lesson on how each man should proceed in every phase of life. That you might be one with the Father, even as he was one with the Father, and his contact was always through the Christ, the Word of God. That is the inner fact of all men. Christ is all and in all, and Christ is the inner reality of each individual. 18. There is only one kind of intuition, just as there is only one kind of physical sight. You can, through your eyes, look toward and discover anything you wish. You may look for beauty and ugliness, and you may use the same sight. One is desirable and the other is undesirable. You may train your intuition to search out the determining principle and its operation. You can train it into psychic planes and find out what is going on there, or you can train it on your neighbor and discover his secret thought and motives. But intuition turned in any other direction than to discover the operations of the principle itself is perversion of this sense back of all senses, and hypnosis is the result, for it clouds the clear perception of the individual. The only way to escape any degree of hypnosis is to train the intuition into the channels of direct knowing. This is the path of light, and any perversion of the intuitive sense is the path of darkness. 19. The old theory of occultism, that the senses must be destroyed or killed or reversed, is not in accordance with the teachings of the pure Hindu philosophy. They say that all is spirit, that the senses are spirit but must be so used, and their true spiritual significance preserved. They become avenues of expression of that which the intuition learns as coming from the spirit. This direct knowing is also direct manifestation. If we would accept the fact which is revealed in principle, that fact would become immediately manifest to us. It is just that easy. The Westerner has simply submerged it in complexities. 20. When you rightly understand the nature of what you call matter as pure spirit substance, then you can see just why this is true. The Hindu says, compress the cube and you have a different substance. Expand it and you have a different substance. you do not define this as material or physical substance. As in the compression or expansion, you do not change its nature, but only the relative position of the atoms. Water or ice is just as much H2O, regardless of its form. And this power of the expansion and contraction is the fourth dimension of it. Likewise, the power of extending anything from one magnitude to another by the simple rearrangement of the atoms is its fourth dimension and does not change its inherent character. If all things are made of spiritual substance, there is no dividing line between what we have called spirit and its manifestation. Only when man is under a state of hypnosis does he imagine that there is something besides the unity of all things and the oneness of all things. Through his state of hypnosis, he imposes false influences into form, and these distortions are the fabrications of his own ignorance. For the teacher. Paragraphs 1 and 2. The lesson to be found in this explanation of the quantum theory offers an unusual opportunity to impress upon the mind of the individual the fact that all of his lack is due to separating himself from the original first cause. Just as a motor stops when it is disconnected from an electrical current, or a light goes out when the switch is turned off, so does man cease to function in just that degree that he separates himself from the Spirit of God. Paragraph 3. When it comes to a matter of merely manipulating the world with thought, trying to demonstrate by the use of affirmation, man sooner or later exhausts the ability to achieve. Only through deep meditation upon the oneness of all things, man's unity with God, is his power revived so that he once again returns to the position of power that is rightfully his. Man of himself can do nothing. It is the Spirit that quickens, and when this mind and nature are reanimated with the Spirit, his words and acts become alive, and then only does he move with power. Paragraphs 4, 5, 6, and 7. It makes a vast difference to man whether he proceeds from a true or from an assumed or false hypothesis. The conclusions at which he arrives in his calculations depend upon the foundation or principle from which he moves. If that foundation is false, the conclusion must be false. As creation began in the great universal whole, man can find no substantial starting point for his own activities except from that same basis. One cannot adapt a principle to his own thought, but he must adapt himself to the movement of the principle, and his thoughts must be evolved from that principle. In turn, his actions must conform to that same principle, and then only can he hope to have the results forthcoming that are consistent with his fundamental nature. Paragraphs 8 and 9. These paragraphs involve the difference between true and false reason, between intelligent logic and false logic. We get our minds completely reversed when we work from the external, or when we work merely for external results that we imagine will suit our own idea of things. There is an established order in the universe, and only through aligning ourselves with that natural order of things can we hope for satisfactory results. Paragraph 10. The force which designated and created the universe could not be considered an unintelligent force or blind force moving without conscious direction. Electricity must be governed by intelligence in our everyday affairs, else we could not have light, heat, and power resulting from it. Electricity by itself is a blind force, but subjected to the control of intelligence, it produces constructive results. So all creative force of the universe must be subjected to the direction of intelligence, else there never could have been an orderly creation. Paragraphs 11, 12, and 13. Right knowledge comes through becoming so still that one feels within himself the movement of universal forces, the Spirit of God. Its activity not only becomes a vitalizing influence, but it awakens an understanding in the mind of man. The inspiration of the Almighty giveth understanding. Just as you must first understand the operation of the principle of mathematics through quiet submission to the rule, so must you contemplate the action of divine principle until you understand its operations. Knowledge is the accumulation of ideas, and true knowledge would be the result of seeing the Spirit of God made manifest. Knowledge comes in the completion of a process. Understanding discerns the way toward results. Paragraph 14. Neither mind nor matter have any power to create or to produce. The power to produce is in mind or spirit. It is the spirit that quickens. Holding thoughts and driving the body only deplete the man. Life is renewed, power awakened through communion with spirit. Paragraphs 15 and 16. Faith is the means through which principle is discerned and applied. First, faith is resting the mind of its own activities to gain new impetus. Secondly, it is relying upon that impetus until it produces results. Faith is a sort of mental transformer whereby unaccomplished things or unmanifest powers are brought to manifestation. Paragraph 17. The secret of Jesus' power was in his complete reliance upon what he felt moving in his deepest nature, and which he called the Father within. The law of God is written in your inward parts, and to outwardly obey what is moving within is to bring the inward capacity into outer manifestation. That which moves in the deepest side of man's nature is the inward action of the universal principle. Paragraph 18. Intuition is only another avenue through which consciousness may be increased. Through intuition, one gains the inner facts of life. Trained to the omniscience of God, or the all-enfolding intelligence, man can understand anything or any situation from the viewpoint of absolute knowing. Paragraph 19. The outer senses are outlets or avenues through which we express inward knowledge to the outward world. The outer senses should not be condemned or destroyed. In so doing, you would destroy your outlets into the world. See to it that the function of your whole being lines up with the innermost tendencies of your nature until you express what you are in the sight of God. Paragraph 20. To know the true nature of all things, not as separated or isolated divisions, but as one and the same thing in different stages of progression, is to be possessed of the power and dominion that belongs to you as a product of one first cause.